Living on a remote Scottish island farm is hard work, most of the time. There is the occasional Saturday afternoon when you're out catching fish for dinner and you bump into a pod of Risso's dolphins less than 500 metres from your house.
Slapping. Look at him slapping.
This is the beautiful island of Auskerry, a part of the archipelago off the north coast of Scotland called Orkney. This is where my family have lived for nearly 50 years, and there is something magical about the place. But life on an island does bring many challenges too. At university on the mainland, people would ask me, what did you do all day when you lived there? How did you stay sane with just your parents when you literally couldn't escape? This series has hopefully given an indication of the answers to those kinds of questions. But if you're wondering about more practical things like, how do you get mail in such a remote place? Well, you'll have to keep watching to the end of this video. First though, it's back to the subject that helped bring this channel to so many of you, cutting peat for fuel. It's a job I took over from my dad years ago when it became painful on his knee. Incredibly, nearly 1 million of you have now watched the video I made about it. So I wanted to show you more of the satisfying process that takes it from wet chunks of the ground to nuggets of warmth for my parents in the winter months. As I cut it out of the ground, it gets stacked up on the bank. This is the heaviest and most exhausting part of the job, as my dad knows only too well. Indulge me then, as I labour that point to my cousin Charlie, and by extension, to you too.
Well, he's signalling us.
Yeah, he wants to come closer. During a break in a session of spreading the peats out to dry, I wanted to make sure I was armed with stats next time anyone questioned if I was pulling my weight, literally. So, with a set of scales and a bucket, it was time to weigh each cut of peat.
This is all just to make you look better, isn't it?
Pick a piece up, move it to where it
put it in here.
Can't be changed.
And then we'll weigh it. Oh, it's really light. Oh, this is an easy job. That's it, that's it. That's all we need is this one. They look like
Aero chocolate.
yeah, it does. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Or like a really rich fudge brownie, chocolate brownie.
Yeah, with some decent oyster catchers. No, some decent.
What would you mean?
Ice cream.
Oh yeah,
mates.
Ice cream. I'll grab this one. Let's see how much that weighs. You can put that down now.
The top cut is obviously the least sodden, and therefore the lightest. The bottom cut then is always the heaviest.
What's that, Simon? Is that 10.2? 10.2.
I don't know where you are.
Here.
At all. Oh, up here, 10.2.
So this is the mid cut. Is that right, Simon?
Mid cut.
Right, let's see what this weighs. See if it's any different. I'll just let it reset. Okay, here we go. What does that say, Simon?
I would expect it to be heavier.
So the third one's probably going to be even heavier still, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's try that one. So this is the deep cut now. This is the deep cut here.
Yep.
So this is fresh. Just out the ground, still brown on this side. You can see it's all like muddy still. Shove it in here.
This hurts me deeply to see my carefully mined peat broken up, but given this is all for my bragging rights, I keep my mouth shut.
Right, we're going to weigh this one, Simon.
Right.
So the bucket's 1 kilo, I think. What's that say?
1364.
Wow.
1312.89.
So it's easily 12 kilos each cut.
Yes.
Easily.
What do you think now that you felt one of them and think about how many I've had to cut?
Oh, I think it's easy, mate. No, it's a lot of hard work, that. That's a lot of hard work. It's awkward angles as well, and you can see how much you've cut. And how long does this take you?
One mission a day.
If the average is about 10 kilograms per peat, that means that every 100 peats I cut is roughly a UK measure of a tonne in weight when it's freshly out of the ground. This obviously varies so much, but it'll do as a point of argument if I ever need it with my brothers.
Dries out, goes on the fire, nice hot showers. Happy days.
That's actually quite a nice little rookery of.
It looks amazing, the cut. Mish, does this all need laying out?
Yeah.
I just want to take this chance to say thank you for supporting my channel. I love all your comments, so please do leave them below. And if you could click the like button, that will allow more people to see this video. After each peat gets a skin on one side, it gets built into houses. This process is called raising the peat. If you get good dry and sunny weather, particularly if it's windy too, peat can dry quite quickly in this state. And then it's ready to take home. They say peat warms you up twice before you burn it. Firstly when you cut it out of the ground, and then when you cart it home. Mum and Dad have come to help me with this process today.
And remember, we like them in piles because it's much, I was just reminding myself,
Yeah.
it's much easier to take them off in piles, not, no, that's not in piles.
This was always a whole family activity. Everyone knows tractors are incredibly popular with children, especially young boys. So my brothers and I would be persuaded to come and help with the prospect of riding on the trailer. This job can be quite unpleasant if it's a windy day, as the gusts blow the peat dust into your eyes. But then the absolute worst conditions are a completely still day, when the midges make it unbearable. Today then is just about perfect. We fill the trailer up as much as we dare, because we have to drive home up a hill and the ground can be quite boggy en route. Dad would always periodically wobble the trailer whilst looking at the tyres before making a confident prediction of how much more weight it could take. I've never been quite sure how accurate that was, but we never got stuck that I can remember anyway. We used to do 1 or 2 loads a day, or even more sometimes, when we got good weather in the early autumn. Particularly now that I cut the peat and spread most of it myself, I love this process of taking it home even more. There's something so satisfying about gathering together your peat harvest, knowing it's going to keep your family warm all year round. Back at the house, and we have a return of unusual visitors. You may have seen in a previous episode that after a storm we saw a woodpecker on the island. This is pretty remarkable given the only trees on the island are in Mum's vegetable garden and only stand about 1.5 metres tall. But the woodpeckers seem to be content with a couple of bits of driftwood in the front garden. These were washed up decades ago and Mum kept them as sculptures. I never thought I'd hear the sound of woodpeckers on Auskerry.
Hi Tommy, sorry for the delay.
Unfortunately, in September, my mum had to leave the island suddenly again after my granny's health took a turn for the worse.
It's not the ideal situation.
With the sea too rough for a boat, we gave our friend Tommy a call. He lives on one of the other islands in Orkney, which has a causeway to the main island and an airstrip. Tommy is a flying enthusiast and loves flying around Scotland in his light aircrafts. He's a character and a lovely guy, and we're so lucky to be able to occasionally ask him to take one of us off in an emergency when the weather doesn't allow for safe passage across the sea. So once Mum is kitted up in her life jacket and strapped into the 2-seater plane, she's off.
Safe trip.
Cheers, Tommy. And then it was just us.
No, we did good.
Dad and I are now alone on the island for the next week or so. It's tricky looking after him and managing the farm, so I didn't film very much that week. But I did take the camera on another trip to the peat bank, where we were bringing home one of the last loads. It's so hard seeing my dad's decline in terms of his physical strength and the progression of his dementia, but it's very special to be able to spend so much time with him. One of the strange things about growing up, particularly when a family member becomes ill, is the switching of roles. It was always me who clambered aboard the trailer when we'd filled up with a load of peat, and then it would be Dad to carefully drive off. Now it's me looking back on Dad to check he's okay as he perches on the peat, when I remember so vividly being in his position. Once we're back in the steading at home and he's safely back on level ground, we get to work building the peat stack. This has to be done very carefully because the absolute worst case scenario is that the stack collapses later in the year. And that can happen quite easily because each peat will shrink by several inches as it dries for the next year in the stack. So unless it's built solidly, the gaps that appear will lead to a huge problem and a major rebuild next year. When it's done, we cover it up and let the sun, wind and time do its thing. This stack will be burnt from next summer onwards. My dad has been doing this for more than 45 years, and it's special for me to follow in his footsteps while sharing the experience with him. There's so much that we can do ourselves self-sufficiently on Auskerry, but there's also a lot that we rely on from other people. These days we have Wi-Fi on the island, so we have a lot less mail than we did when I was growing up. But we wouldn't have any mail at all if it wasn't for a fisherman on the neighbouring island of Stronsay, who's been bringing us our post for over 40 years.
Did you see me come on, Simon? Yeah, I saw the tops of your mast.
In the UK, the Royal Mail has a duty to deliver post to everyone, regardless of where you live. Lobster and crab fisherman John Stevenson has been fishing around Auskerry for decades, and once a month he collects our sack of mail from the post office in Stronsay and brings it to us. Over my lifetime, John and his family have been cherished family friends. We always have a good catch-up for as long as his fishing schedule will allow. John also kindly offers to bring other essential items like food or fuel too whenever he comes. Now you may remember an earlier episode when our water pump became increasingly unreliable.
It's not doing anything, is it?
No,
There's no sound of a spark happening, is there?
no.
We did eventually get it to work, but it wasn't safe or convenient not to be able to count on it working when we needed it. So, thankfully, we've been able to get a new one delivered today by John, which is a relief all round.
I hope we'll scratch that. Doing the feet.
Yeah, a few scratches over the next few years, I'm sure.
Is your pump pack it up? It's caused so much trouble the last years. Ah, yeah, it's not worth it.
And then it was time for John to untie his ropes and say goodbye again.
Oh, really wet and not very warm.
Oh, yes, that hit bad for rain and wind.
Yeah, I love your top. You see that, Hamish?
Watching this footage back is very poignant for me now, because since I filmed it, John has told us that given he's now in his 80s, he's decided to take a well-earned retirement. So this was actually the last ever time he came into the pier on Auskerry, after hundreds and hundreds of visits over decades. This site will be sorely missed by all of us.
Bit wave, Simon.
Thanks for watching this episode. As always, I appreciate the support. See you on the next one. Cheerio.